Hello, everyone. Today I bring you a fascinating and mysterious story that will certainly mess with your heads. We will explore the near-death experience of Iago Villafuerte, a young man who had an impressive revelation about the future of humanity. He witnessed angels descending to Earth for an epic battle predicted for September 2024. Stay with me until the end, because this is one of those must-hear stories. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and activate the bell so you don't miss any updates. Shall we begin? Hello? My name is Iago Villafuerte. I'm 30 years old now. But the story I'm going to share happened when I was 17. It's a narrative that completely transformed my life and my worldview. Ever since I can remember, I've always had an unwelcome companion. Asthma. It was present in every breath, in every moment of joy and sadness, as if I was born with an extra weight on my lungs, something I had to constantly carry. I grew up in Miami, in a loving and caring Latin family. My mother, Esperanza, was my main guardian, always attentive and ready to act at the slightest sign of respiratory difficulty. My father was present too, of course, but my mother seemed to have a sixth sense for these things. I think every mother does, right? I led a normal life, or as normal as possible for someone with severe asthma. I attended school, had friends, and did the things teenagers usually do. But there was always that persistent fear in my mind. The fear of having an attack in public, of not being able to breathe, of, well, dying. It's strange to think about death at 17, but it was something inevitable for me. My routine was filled with inhalers, medications, and hospital visits. I knew Dr. Manuel Alvarez better than some of my teachers, as he had been taking care of me since I was little. I trusted him completely. He always said I was strong, a fighter. Sometimes I believed him, other times I didn't. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened that morning. It was a day like any other. I woke up, got ready for school. Everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. As soon as I opened my eyes, I felt something was wrong. Very wrong. The air wouldn't come in. It was as if a huge weight was on my chest. I tried to sit up in bed, reach for my inhaler on the bedside table, but my movements were slow and heavy. Panic began to take over me. I wanted to scream for help, call my mother, but my voice wouldn't come out. All I managed was a muffled and desperate sound. It was at that moment I realized this wasn't a common asthma attack. It was something much, much worse. And that's when the most incredible and frightening journey of my life began. A journey that took me to the limits between life and death, and forever changed the way I see the world and my place in it. But before I get into the details of this experience, I want you to understand one thing. What I'm going to tell you may seem unbelievable, even impossible, but I can assure you that every word is true. It's my truth, my experience. I hope that by sharing it I can bring a bit of light and hope, just as this experience brought to me. That morning when I realized I couldn't breathe, time seemed to freeze. Each second dragged on like hours. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, fast and irregular. The room around me began to blur, the colors blending like in an abstract painting. I don't know how long it took for my mother to hear me. It could have been seconds or minutes, but for me it felt like an eternity. When she entered the room, I saw the panic in her eyes. I think it was at that moment I truly understood the gravity of the situation. My mother, who always remained calm during my crises, was visibly terrified. She rushed to me, helped me up. Her words were a blur, but I remember her saying something like, "Hold on, my son." With a strength I didn't know she had, she practically carried me out of the room, down the stairs and into the car. The trip to the hospital was like a feverish nightmare, with the streets of Miami passing in blurs of light and color. I heard the sound of the horn, the distant sirens, and my mother's voice talking to me, begging me to stay awake. But it was so challenging. My eyes wanted to close. My body felt excessively heavy. We arrived to the hospital near South Beach. The bright lights of the emergency room blinded me for a moment. I remember being placed on a stretcher, seeing unfamiliar faces moving quickly around me. And then, amidst the chaos, I recognized a familiar face, Dr. Alvarez. He began examining me immediately. I heard scattered words. Low saturation. Severe bronchospasm. epinephrine. I felt pricks in my arms. Probably from needles and injections. Doctor Alvarez was talking to me, asking me to stay calm and try to breathe slowly. But how can you breathe slowly when you feel like you're drowning in air? An oxygen mask was placed over my face. The forced air in my lungs hurt, but at the same time it brought momentary relief. I wanted to tell them I was scared, that I didn't want to die. But I couldn't speak. All I could do was look into my mother's worried eyes, who was holding my hand tightly. The following minutes were a whirlwind of activity. More doctors arrived, more tests were conducted. I heard the beeping of machines, urgent voices giving orders. Dr. Alvarez was constantly by my side, monitoring my condition. Gradually, I began to feel the effects of the medication. My breathing became a bit easier, but I still felt exhausted, as if I had run a marathon. The fear was still there, pulsing beneath the surface. It was then that I heard Dr. Alvarez say something about letting me rest, that the worst was over. My mother kissed my forehead, her tears falling on my face. I wanted to tell her that everything was okay, that I was going to be fine. But the words wouldn't come out. My eyelids were heavy, so heavy. I fought against sleep, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I would never open them again. But the exhaustion was too strong. The last thing I saw before succumbing to sleep was the nurse's face, telling me to relax, that she would be there with me. And then, darkness. But it wasn't the end. In fact, it was just the beginning of something I could never have imagined. Something that would change my life forever. When I closed my eyes on that hospital bed, I expected to find sleep. You know that feeling when you're about to sleep and your body feels heavy? It was like that at first, but then something strange happened. The feeling of heaviness disappeared completely, as if I had become as light as a feather. Suddenly, I was no longer lying down. It was as if I were floating. It's hard to explain. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I did, and found myself in a place that was no longer the hospital room. It was a dark space, but not frightening. It was more like a comfortable void. I looked down and was startled. There I was, lying on the hospital bed. I could see my pale and motionless body, with tubes and machines connected. I saw the doctors and nurses around me, working frantically. And my mother, oh my mother. She was there, holding my hand, praying softly. My first instinct was to shout, to tell them that I was okay, that I was up there. But no sound came out. I tried to move towards them, but it was as if there was an invisible barrier preventing me. The strangest thing about all this, I didn't feel afraid. For the first time in a long time, there was no tightness in my chest, no struggle to breathe. I felt at peace, calm, as if everything was exactly as it should be. As I watched the scene below, I began to notice something different. It was as if I could feel the emotions of everyone in the room. My mother's fear, Dr. Alvarez's determination, the nurse's concern. All of this hit me in waves, but not in an overwhelming way. It was more like understanding. Suddenly the scene began to fade, as if it were dissolving. For a moment I was disoriented, and then, in the blink of an eye, I found myself in a completely different place. It was the kitchen of my house, but not the current kitchen. It was as it was years ago when I was a child. The smell of freshly made pancakes filled my senses, and there, with her back to me, was my grandmother, Abuela Camila. My heart skipped a beat. Abuela Camila had passed away when I was 10 years old. Seeing her there, alive and making pancakes as she used to on Sunday mornings, brought a wave of emotions I wasn't prepared to feel. Abuela? I tried to call out, but no sound came. I tried to touch her, but my hand simply passed through her body, as if I were the ghost. It was at that moment that panic began to take hold of me. What was happening? Before I could understand, the scene changed. Again, the cozy kitchen vanished, and I found myself in a dark, empty space. However, I was not alone. Around me, there were other presences. I can't call them people, as they had no defined forms. They were more like essences, and they all seemed as lost and confused as I was. I tried to communicate with them, to understand where we were and what was happening. But it was as if we were all isolated in our own bubbles of existence. We could perceive each other, but not interact. It was in this moment of confusion and isolation that I noticed something in the distance. It was a point of light, so small and distant that at first, I thought it was a figment of my imagination. But the more I focused on it, the stronger and brighter it became. Something inside me urged me to move toward that light. It wasn't a conscious thought, but more like a calling. A deep certainty that there lay the answers to all my questions, and so, leaving behind the confusion and fear, I began my journey toward that light. Little did I know that what awaited me would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything in between. As I approached that light, it was as if the very concept of movement had transformed. I wasn't walking or flying in the traditional sense. It was more like being drawn. As if that light was a giant magnet and I, a small piece of metal. As I got closer, the light became more and more intense. But it wasn't blinding or uncomfortable. It was welcoming, warm. Imagine the most comforting hug you've ever received and multiply that feeling by 1,000. That's how I felt embraced by that light. When I finally reached the light, it was like diving into an ocean of peace and love. All the fears, all the worries I ever had in life simply vanished. It was as if I had shed a heavy coat I didn't even know I was carrying. In that moment I felt complete, whole, as if all the pieces of the puzzle of my existence had finally come together. I was me. But at the same time, I was so much more than that. It was as if I could feel a connection with everything. And then, amidst all that peace and love, I realized I wasn't alone. There was a presence there with me. I can't say I saw someone in the traditional sense. It was more like feeling someone, a warm and welcoming presence. This presence introduced itself as my mentor. Not with words, you see. It was more like an understanding that arose in my mind. It radiated wisdom and love that put me completely at ease. My mentor then began to guide me on a journey through my own life, but it wasn't like watching a movie. It was like reliving each moment, each emotion. I saw moments from my childhood that I had completely forgotten. Moments of joy, sadness, fear. I saw the day I stood up for a classmate who was being bullied. At the time, I didn't think it was a big deal. But now, seeing through these new eyes, I could perceive the impact that small action had. I saw how that act of kindness spread, affecting not only my classmate but others around him. My mentor showed me how every action, every word, every thought creates waves of energy that ripple through the universe. I saw how even the smallest acts of kindness can have a huge impact, far beyond what we can imagine. But it wasn't just the good moments I revisited. I also saw the times when I was selfish, when I hurt others. However, there was no judgment, only understanding, and a chance to learn from those mistakes. Throughout this review, I felt an unconditional love coming from my mentor. It didn't matter what I had done, good or bad. This love remained constant, and gradually, I began to feel that same love for myself and for all others. It was as if I could see, for the first time, how interconnected we all are. Every person I had ever met, every stranger who crossed my path. We were all part of an intricate web of relationships and mutual impacts. I understood that life is not about accumulating things or achieving status. It's about growing, learning, loving. It's about the connections we make and the positive impact we can have on the world around us. When this review came to an end, in the end, I felt completely transformed. It was as if I had gained a new vision, a deeper understanding of the meaning of life. However, my journey was far from over. Of peace and tranquility, it was a place where I could gather my thoughts and process everything I had just witnessed. My mentor sat beside me, her presence a comforting anchor in this sea of revelations. She encouraged me to embrace the uncertainty of the future and reminded me that it was okay not to have all the answers right away. As I sat there, surrounded by the serene energy of the garden, I began to feel a sense of clarity. I realized that my journey was just beginning, and that I had the power to shape my own destiny through my choices and actions. The vision of the cosmic battle had shown me the stakes, but it also highlighted the potential for growth and transformation within each individual. My mentor's words echoed in my mind. Every act of kindness, every decision made with love and compassion, could tip the scales in favor of light. I understood that while I might feel small in the grand scheme of things, my contributions were significant. I was part of a larger tapestry, woven together with countless others, each thread playing its role in the unfolding story of humanity. With renewed determination, I thanked my mentor for her guidance and wisdom. I knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to face it with courage and hope. The vision had opened my eyes to a reality beyond my own, a reality where I could make a difference, no matter how small. As I prepared to leave the garden and return to my life, I carried with me the lessons I had learned and the vision of a future where light could triumph over darkness. I was no longer just a passive observer of my own life. I was an active participant in a cosmic journey, ready to embrace whatever came my way. Ofereço a você a chance de retornar ao mundo físico, armado com o conhecimento e a sabedoria que você adquiriu aqui. Você pode escolher permanecer neste reino de paz e luz. Eu hesitei por um momento, sentindo o peso da decisão diante de mim. A tentação de permanecer naquele lugar de serenidade era forte, mas eu sabia que minha jornada ainda não estava completa. Havia tanto a fazer, tanto a compartilhar. Minha guia parecia entender meus pensamentos e, com gesto suave, encorajou-me a seguir meu coração. Lembre-se, Iago, a verdadeira coragem não é a ausência de medo, mas a decisão de seguir em frente apesar dele. Com essas palavras ecoando em minha mente, tomei minha decisão. Eu daria o passo através do portal retornando ao mundo com novo propósito e uma missão clara. Quando atravessei o portal, senti uma sensação de calor e amor me envolvendo, como se o próprio universo estivesse me acolhendo de volta. E então, tudo ficou escuro por um momento, antes de eu abrir os olhos e encontrar-me de volta no mundo físico. Eu estava de volta, mas não era mais o mesmo. A experiência havia me transformado de maneiras que eu ainda estava começando a compreender. Eu sabia que tinha uma responsabilidade, uma missão de compartilhar o que havia aprendido e de viver de acordo com os princípios que minha guia havia me ensinado. Enquanto me ajustava ao meu retorno, sentia uma paz interior que nunca havia experimentado antes. Eu sabia que, independentemente dos desafios que enfrentasse, nunca estaria sozinho. A presença amorosa de minha guia e o conhecimento que havia adquirido seria meus companheiros constantes. E assim, com coração cheio de gratidão e determinação, comecei a trilhar meu novo caminho, pronto para fazer a diferença no mundo, pequeno ato de bondade de cada vez. It felt like an immense effort. Gradually I managed to lift my eyelids, and the blurry shapes around me slowly came into focus. I was in a hospital room, surrounded by familiar faces. My parents were there, and the relief in their eyes was palpable. My mother, Esperanza, held my hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. I could see the love and hope in her eyes, and it filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. My mentor's words echoed in my mind. Every life is valuable. Every experience is an opportunity for growth. I realized that returning to my physical body meant embracing the challenges that came with it, but it also meant having the chance to make a difference, to be a beacon of light in a world that desperately needed it. As I lay there, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to return. The journey back had been arduous, but I knew it was worth it. I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge and love I had gained during my spiritual journey. The process of reintegrating into my body was indescribable. It felt like swimming through layers upon layers of reality, each one denser and heavier than the last. The light that had once enveloped me gradually faded until I found myself plunged into total darkness. For a moment, panic set in. Where was I? What was happening? But then I remembered my mentor's words. You are never alone. I clung to that thought like a lifeline in a stormy sea. Suddenly, I began to feel again. It wasn't the ethereal, light sensation I had experienced in the realm of light, but rather intense physical sensations, and to be honest, quite uncomfortable. I felt pain, a sharp pain in my chest that immediately reminded me of my struggle with asthma. I felt cold, a chill that seemed to penetrate to my very bones, and above all, I felt an immense weight, as if every cell in my body was fighting against gravity. Slowly, very slowly, I began to hear sounds around me, At first, they were just indistinct noises, as if I were submerged in water. But gradually, little by little, the sounds around me became clearer. I could distinguish the steady beeping of machines, the soft murmur of voices, and the light sound of footsteps on the linoleum floor. I tried to open my eyes, but it felt like an immense effort. My eyelids were too heavy. I struggled to move my fingers, my arms, any part of my body, but got no response. It was then that a clear and familiar voice reached my ears. Iago. Honey. Can you hear me? It was my mother's voice, Esperanza. There was so much love and concern in her tone that my heart tightened. I desperately wanted to respond, to say that I was okay and that I had returned, but my body wouldn't obey. Shortly after, I heard another voice, deeper and more professional. I recognized it as Dr. Alvarez, Mrs. Villafuerte. I'm noticing signs of increased brain activity. I believe your son is starting to wake up. This may take some time, but it's a good sign. As I struggled to regain control of my body, memories of my experience flashed through my mind. The light, my mentor, the lessons I learned, the vision of the future. All seemed so vivid and yet so distant, like a dream you try to remember before it fades away. I don't know how long I spent in this state of semi-consciousness. It could have been minutes, hours, or even days. Time seemed irrelevant, but slowly, very slowly, I began to feel that I was regaining control of my body. First, I managed to slightly move my fingers. Then, I felt my lips moving, though no sound came out. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity, I managed to open my eyes. The light in the hospital room blinded me momentarily. I blinked several times, trying to adjust my vision. And then, I saw my mother's face. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying so much, but there was a radiant smile on her face. "Iago," she exclaimed, holding my hand. "Oh, thank God you're back." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and sore. I could only make a hoarse sound. Dr. Alvarez, who was on the other side of the bed, quickly offered me a glass of water with a straw. After a few sips, I was finally able to speak. My voice came out weak and hoarse, but the words were clear. "Mom, I'm back." I chose to come back. I saw confusion in her eyes, but also relief and infinite love. Dr. Alvarez began asking me questions, checking my vital signs, but all of that seemed distant and irrelevant at that moment. Lying in that hospital bed, weak and sore, but alive, I knew my true journey was just beginning. I returned with a purpose, with valuable knowledge, and I was determined to fulfill the mission entrusted to me. I looked out the room window and saw the blue sky of Miami. The world seemed the same, but I knew I had changed profoundly, and I was ready to face whatever came, armed with the love and wisdom I experienced on the other side. The days following my awakening in the hospital were a roller coaster of emotions and challenges. Physically, my body was exhausted. The doctors explained that I had gone through a traumatic experience and that recovery would take time. My asthma, though still present, seemed to be under control thanks to the intensive care I received. But the real challenge wasn't physical. It was mental and emotional. How to explain to others what I had experienced, how to convey the depth and importance of what I learned on the other side, and more importantly, how to incorporate this knowledge into my daily life. In the early days, I was eager to share my experience with everyone. I talked to my parents, to Dr. Alvarez, to the nurses. I spoke about the light, about my mentor, about the lessons I learned. Some people listened with fascination, others with skepticism. Dr. Alvarez in particular seemed very interested, asking detailed questions and taking notes. My mother, Esperanza, listened to everything with a mix of wonder and concern. "Honey," she told me one day, holding my hand, "no matter what you saw or experienced, the important thing is that you're here with us now." As the days passed, I began to realize that not everyone was ready or willing to hear about my experience. Some friends who came to visit seemed uncomfortable when I mentioned the subject. Others tried to change the topic, talking about school or what I had missed while I was in the hospital. Gradually, I learned to gauge what I shared and with whom I shared it. I realized that the true lesson wasn't in telling everyone about my experience, but in living according to what I learned. Readjusting to my daily life was a slow and challenging process. Living a normal life became a real challenge. Things that once seemed fundamental, like school grades, fashionable clothes, and minor disagreements, now seemed insignificant compared to what I had experienced. On the other hand, aspects I used to ignore, the smile of a stranger, the song, the birds at dawn, the kindness of a gesture, took on a new meaning. My relationship with asthma also transformed. Previously, I saw it as an adversary to be fought and hated. Now, although it was still a challenge, I viewed it as part of my journey, something that taught me compassion and resilience. One of the biggest changes was in how I interacted with people. I remembered what my mentor had taught me about the interconnectedness of everything. I began to practice more empathy, trying to see beyond appearances and understand the internal struggles each person faced. At school, I noticed I was more patient with my peers and more willing to help those in difficulty. I started engaging in volunteer work, feeling that each small act of kindness was a way to honor what I had learned. However, not everything was simple. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by the responsibility of the knowledge I possessed. The vision of the future, the cosmic battle approaching, weighed on my mind. How could I, an ordinary teenager, make a difference in the face of something so grand? During one of these crises of doubt, I remembered my mentor's words: every act of kindness, no matter how small, strengthens the forces of light. I then realized that my mission was not to save the world alone, but to be a light in my own circle of influence, inspiring others to do the same. As the months passed, I noticed that some details of my experience began to become hazy, like trying to recall a dream. The emotions and lessons remained vivid, but some specific details started to slip away. This scared me at first, but then I understood that the important thing wasn't the exact details, but how I applied what I had learned in my daily life. I started keeping a journal, not just to record my experience, but to document my journey of growth and transformation. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities to apply the lessons I learned, and so, day by day, I continued my journey, no longer just as Iago, the boy with asthma from Miami, but as someone who had glimpsed something beyond, someone with a greater purpose. The life I had chosen to return to was just beginning, and I was determined to make every moment count. Today, 13 years have passed since that fateful morning in Miami. 13 years since I stood at the brink of death and chose to return. Looking back, I see how each day since then has been a journey of discovery, growth, and sometimes challenge. Many things have changed since that day. I graduated high school, went to college, and built a career. I am in a 4-year relationship with a college classmate, someone I believe to be the future wife I saw during my near-death experience. Life has taken its course, as it does for all of us. Recently, I had a dream where an angel spoke to me about September 7th. I think something big is coming. My asthma, well, it's still with me. I still have bad days. Still need to use my inhaler occasionally, but my relationship with it has completely changed. It's no longer a burden, but a reminder of life's fragility, the importance of each breath, and the strength we have within us to overcome challenges. The knowledge and lessons I acquired during my near-death experience continue to shape my daily life. I try to live each day with purpose, aware of the impact my actions and words can have on others. It's not always easy. There are days when I find myself falling into old habits, worried about trivial things. But then I remember the bigger vision that was shown to me, and it centers me again. One of the hardest things has been dealing with the knowledge of the future that was revealed to me. The vision of the cosmic battle to come in September 24 is never far from my thoughts. As that date approaches, I feel a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Part of me wants to warn everyone about what's coming, but I've learned that this is not the way. My task is not to scare people, or convince them of something they may not be willing to accept. Instead, my role is to be a beacon of light, inspiring others through my actions and the way I conduct my life. I have been increasingly involved in community work and causes that promote kindness and mutual understanding. I believe that each act of kindness, each moment of empathy, strengthens the forces of light in this imminent battle. It's not about grand heroic gestures, but about small daily actions that together can make a big difference. Sometimes I wonder if what I saw will really happen. Did I understand it correctly? Can my actions and those of others like me change the course of events? I don't have definitive answers to these questions. All I can do is continue living according to what I've learned, trusting that I'm on the right path. One thing I've learned is the importance of being present in the moment. Although I have knowledge of the future, I cannot live solely for it. Each day is precious. Each interaction is an opportunity to spread light. Looking to the future, I feel a mix of emotions. There is apprehension, of course. The magnitude of what's to come is daunting, but there is also hope. Hope that humanity can come together, that we can choose light over darkness. I don't know exactly what September 2024 will bring. I don't know how this cosmic battle will manifest in our physical world. But I know I'll be ready to face whatever comes, not as a solitary hero, but as part of an interconnected network of souls, each doing their part to bring more light into the world. As I prepare for what's to come, I remember my mentor's words. You are never alone. I feel this truth deeply. Whatever the future holds, I know I'm not alone on this journey, and so, I continue living each day with gratitude, love, and purpose. I keep sharing my story with those willing to listen, not to convince, but to inspire. I continue working on myself, striving to be the best version of myself that I can be. The near-death experience I had at 17 was just the beginning. The true journey has been every day since then, and it will continue in the days, months, and years to come. I'm eager, though a bit apprehensive, to see what the future holds. But above all, I am grateful. Grateful for this second chance at life. Grateful for the knowledge I've been given. And grateful for the opportunity to make a difference, no matter how small. The future may be uncertain, but one thing is certain. Every breath is a gift. Every moment is an opportunity. And each of us has the power to be a light in the darkness. And it is with this thought that I face each new day, ready for whatever comes.